To the son, the assets. To the daughter-in-law, the debts. The notary read these words 1 week after my father-in-law Albert's funeral. For 10 years, I had cared for him after a stroke left him bedridden. I quit my accounting job, gave up having children, spent every day feeding him, bathing him, reading to him. At the funeral, everyone said, "Without you, he wouldn't have survived. He loved you like a daughter. Such devotion is rare." Then the notary opened the will. My son Frank inherits the apartment and garden shed. My daughter-in-law Emma inherits the debt obligations totaling $52,000. $52,000 in debts. I couldn't breathe. My husband Frank said nothing, just stared at the floor. That night I asked him, "How could Dad do this to me?" He shrugged. "Maybe he thought you did it out of self-interest." Self-interest. 10 years of my life, out of self-interest. 2 weeks later, I found something in Albert's dresser drawer that changed everything. The father-in-law passed away quietly while he slept. I cried as if I had lost my own father, because I had been by his side every minute for 10 years. At the funeral, everyone said, "Without you, he wouldn't have survived." But a week later, the notary announced the inheritance. To the son, the assets. To the daughter-in-law, the debts. But the old man had prepared his final lesson. Emma carefully adjusted the pillow under Albert's head and checked to make sure the blanket hadn't shifted. The old man lay motionless, only his eyes following her every movement. 3 years had already passed since the day a stroke confined him to his bed, but she remembered every day, every hour of this difficult life. "Emma, bring me some water," the father-in-law whispered, barely audibly. His voice was weak, but she had learned to understand him with a single word. Emma quickly fetched a glass of water and inserted a straw to help him drink. "Thank you, my dear daughter," Albert said. These words warmed her heart as always. She had long ceased to be just his daughter-in-law. For him, she had become a true daughter. From the hallway came the sound of the door opening. Frank had returned from work. Emma looked out of her father-in-law's room and saw her husband hastily removing his shoes. "How is everything?" he asked without even looking up. "Good. Dad ate a little today. He's in good spirits," she replied, hoping he would come in to greet his father. "Good. I'll eat dinner quickly and then go to my office. I need to finish the presentation for tomorrow's meeting." Frank went to the kitchen without glancing into his father's room. Emma sighed and returned to the patient. Albert looked at her attentively. "Don't be angry with him. Emma, he's working for the family," the old man said gently. "I'm not angry. Dad, I'm just a little tired." She sat down in the chair next to the bed and took his hand. It was warm but weak. Emma remembered how strong these hands used to be. Albert had worked his whole life as a mechanic. He could repair anything, and now he couldn't even turn over. "Just tell me what's new in the news," he asked. Emma turned on the television quietly and began commenting on what was happening on the screen. This had become their daily ritual. Albert liked to stay informed, and she liked talking with him. Over the years, they had grown very close. 10 years earlier, when Emma had just married Frank, her relationship with her father-in-law wasn't easy at first. He was a strict, taciturn man, accustomed to order and discipline. Emma feared his judgment, tried to please him, but felt a distance. Everything changed when the accident happened. Albert was working in the garden shed, repairing the roof, fell, and hit his head hard. The doctors fought for his life for a long time, and when he woke up, the left side of his body was paralyzed. Frank had just received a promotion and couldn't take time off. "Emma, I know it's hard, but there's no other option. We need to hire a nurse," her husband said. "A nurse, Frank? With what money? Your salary already goes entirely to the mortgage and your father's treatment," she replied. "What do we do then? I can't give up my job. I have to focus on my career now." Emma worked in the accounting department of a small company at the time. The salary was modest, but she liked the work. She knew she had to make a choice. "I'll take care of Dad," she said. "Are you sure? It's very hard." Frank was surprised. "I'm sure. He's not a stranger to me." And so 7 years had passed since that decision. Emma quit her job and devoted herself entirely to caring for her sick father-in-law. At first, it was really very difficult. She didn't know how to properly lift a bedridden patient. She didn't know how to massage or feed someone who couldn't swallow solid food. Albert was irritable and dissatisfied back then. He didn't want to be a burden. He was ashamed of his helplessness. He often refused food, remained silent for days. "Leave me alone," he would say when she tried to feed him. "I won't," Emma replied. "You need to eat to regain your strength." Gradually, the ice melted. Albert saw that she wasn't pretending, that she wasn't performing her duties out of obligation. She genuinely wanted to help him. She truly cared about his condition. "Why are you doing this?" he asked her one day. "What do you mean, why?" "You're like a father to me," she answered. And he understood that it was true. Since then, a special bond formed between them. Albert began telling her about his life, about his youth, about his wife Matilda, whom he had loved deeply and who had died of cancer when Frank was 15 years old. "She was as kind as you," he often said. She always cared more about others than herself. Emma had learned to understand his needs without words. She knew when his back hurt, when he was hungry, when he was sad. She read books to him, played his favorite movies, massaged his hands and feet. Frank, meanwhile, became increasingly immersed in work. He received several promotions, his salary increased, but so did the burden of responsibility. He came home late, tired, without the strength to talk to his sick father. "How are you, Dad?" he would ask. "Good," Emma would answer. "I'm glad. Thank you for everything," he would say, and go directly to his office. Emma understood that it wasn't easy for Frank either. He loved his father but didn't know how to express his feelings. Work had become his way of dealing with pain and guilt. "He's working for us," she repeated to herself, especially in moments of greatest loneliness. Albert noticed how little his son contributed to the family, and it worried him. "Do you think he's upset because he has to endure me?" the old man asked. "How could he be upset?" "Dad, you're not a burden. We're a family," Emma reassured him. "But because of me, you can't work. You have no children. Don't you think about it? Everything will be fine." And it was true. They had no children. At first, they had postponed it. Then came the father-in-law's illness, and it was no longer the right time. Frank said it wasn't time yet. They needed to take care of his father first, build his career, expand the apartment. Emma sometimes wondered how her life would have turned out if Albert hadn't gotten sick. Perhaps she would have had an interesting job, children, travels. But she never regretted her decision. This man had truly grown close to her heart. "Emma, turn on some music," the father-in-law asked. She turned on the radio, and the melody of an old waltz began to play. Albert closed his eyes and smiled gently. "I danced this song with your mother-in-law," he said. "Tell me again about your wedding," Emma asked. And he did, perhaps for the 100th time, but she listened as if it were the first time. These stories connected her to the family, made her part of their shared memory. Outside, it had already grown dark. Frank hadn't come out of his office. Emma helped her father-in-law take his medicine, made his bed, and kissed him on the forehead. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, my dear daughter. Thank you for everything." She turned off the light, left only the nightstand lamp burning, and quietly left the room. Another night awaited her, one where she would get up several times to see how he was sleeping, whether he needed help turning over or drinking. Emma didn't know that this would be one of the last nights of this kind. She didn't know that in a month everything would change. She didn't know that the man she considered the most just in the world had prepared a test for her that would turn her entire life upside down. Emma woke to the silence, a strange, disturbing silence. Normally, she heard the quiet breathing of her father-in-law from the next room. Sometimes he mumbled something in his sleep or groaned, but now there was nothing to hear. She jumped out of bed and ran barefoot to him. Albert lay quietly, but his face had a particularly pale tone. Emma leaned over him and understood. He wasn't breathing. "Dad," she screamed, though she already knew it was too late. Her hands trembled as she searched for his pulse. Nothing. Emma picked up the phone, called the ambulance, then went to wake Frank. "What happened?" he asked, coming out of the office where he had fallen asleep in front of the computer. "Dad has passed away," she whispered. Frank turned pale and ran to his father's room. Emma remained standing in the hallway. Her legs wouldn't carry her. 10 years they had lived together, and now he was gone. The ambulance came and confirmed the death. The doctor said the heart had stopped in his sleep. For people in his condition, this was normal, quietly, without suffering. Emma should have been relieved that her father-in-law hadn't suffered, but inside her was only emptiness. The next days passed as if in a fog. Formalities, funeral home, casket, grave. Emma organized everything alone. Frank was in shock. Many people came to the funeral. Neighbors, old friends of Albert's, colleagues. "He talked a lot about you," said an old lady from the neighboring house. "He said you were like his daughter." "I don't know how he would have lived without you," added the neighbor. "Mr. Schmidt, such devotion is rare." Emma heard these words and cried not out of self-pity, but out of grief for the one who had truly become her family. A week after the funeral, she received a call from a notary. Mr. Schreiber, an older, distinguished man with a gray mustache and stern gaze. "I must read the will of Albert Wagner," he said on the phone. "What will?" Frank wondered. "He never told us he made one." "Nevertheless, the document exists. I ask you to come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m., you and your wife." Emma didn't attach much importance to it. What kind of will could it be? The apartment and the garden shed. That was all her father-in-law had. And besides, the apartment still had a mortgage on it. And the house needed many repairs. "Surely he wants to leave you everything," she said to her husband. "Of course. I'm his only son," Frank replied. The notary's office was located in an old building in the center. The office was furnished with heavy furniture. Framed diplomas and portraits hung on the walls. It smelled of dust and old paper. Mr. Schreiber asked them to sit in armchairs in front of his desk and took a thick folder of documents from a safe. "The will was drafted 2 years ago," he began. "Albert Wagner was in full possession of his mental faculties, which is confirmed by a medical certificate. The witnesses were 2 of my colleagues, and their signatures were notarized." Emma heard all these formalities and thought how strange her father-in-law's full name sounded. For her, he had always been just Dad. "I'll get to the main part," the notary said and put on his glasses. He opened the document. "The apartment at 15 Bach Street, apartment 23, as well as the plot in the Abenson Garden Colony, are bequeathed to the son, Frank Wagner." Frank nodded with satisfaction. Emma wasn't surprised either. It was what was expected. Furthermore, the notary continued with a particularly formal tone, the debt obligations of the testator to the banks in the total amount of $52,000 are transferred to the daughter-in-law, Emma Wagner. Emma didn't immediately understand what she had heard. Debts. What debts? She looked at Frank, but his face was motionless. "Excuse me, I didn't understand," she said. "What debts? Your father-in-law had 2 loans, a consumer loan for $30,000 taken out 3 years ago. The other is a credit card with an accumulated debt of $22,000, the notary explained. But why did he take out these loans? What for? Emma felt the world collapsing around her. That's not specified in the will. I can only say that according to bank records, the money was withdrawn in cash. But why do the debts fall on me? Why not on the son? Emma's voice trembled. That was the will of the testator, the notary answered dryly. The will was drafted in accordance with applicable legislation and cannot be contested. Emma turned to her husband. Frank remained silent, staring at the floor. "Frank, say something," she whispered. "What should I say?" He shrugged. "It was my father's decision." "But $52,000. Where am I supposed to get this money from?" "That's already your problem," the notary interjected. "The banks have the right to demand payment of debts from the heirs. You have the right to refuse the inheritance, but in this case, the inheritance consists exclusively of debts." "Refuse? I don't understand." Emma was in a panic. With a formal declaration of refusal of inheritance. But then the debts would pass to the next heir. The notary looked at Frank. "No," Frank said quickly. "If the will is correctly formulated, I'm not obligated to pay these debts." "Exactly. According to the will, you inherit the assets, and your wife inherits the debts. Everything is legally in order." Emma felt like she couldn't breathe. $52,000. Where was she supposed to get this money from? She had no job, no savings, nothing. This must be a mistake, she said. Dad wouldn't have done that. He loved me. The documents are authentic. The signatures verified. The notary began putting away the papers. You will receive a notarized copy of the will. The banks will be informed of the transfer of obligations. On the street, Emma finally broke down in tears. Tears ran down her cheeks. She couldn't stop. Frank walked beside her in silence. How could he do this to me? She sobbed. 10 years I cared for him like a father. I gave up my job, ruined my health, and he leaves me debts. Calm down, Frank said. We'll find a solution. What solution? It's $52,000. Your salary, the mortgage. We barely have $500 left. What solution are we going to find? I don't know. Right now we need to think. At home, Emma locked herself in the bathroom and cried. She didn't understand what had happened. Albert had always been a just man. He had always told her she was like a daughter to him. Why had he done something like this then? Maybe he lost his mind before death, she thought. Or maybe someone forced him to sign this will. The notary said the document was drafted 2 years ago. At that time, her father-in-law was in full possession of his mental faculties. He communicated normally. He thanked her for her care. In the afternoon, a representative from Northern Bank called. A polite male voice informed her that the loan debt was being transferred to her name and asked her to come in to restructure the documents. But I didn't take out any loan, Emma said. You are the heir according to the will. The debt is automatically transferred, the bank employee explained. And if you refuse to pay, then court collection proceedings begin. Seizure of assets, wage garnishment. Do you want that? Emma hung up and looked at Frank. He was sitting on the sofa watching TV as if nothing had happened. Frank, help me, she asked him. I don't know what to do. And what can I do? The will is the will. That's how my father decided. But it's not fair. You got the apartment and the garden shed and I got the debts. Why? I don't know. He didn't even turn to her. Maybe he thought you should work and not just take care of him. How can you say that? Emma couldn't believe her ears. Who else would have taken care of him? We could have hired a nurse. With what money? Besides, he didn't want strangers near him. I don't know. Maybe he thought you were doing it out of self-interest. These words hit Emma like a blow to the face. Out of self-interest. 10 years of sacrificial care. Out of self-interest? Do you really think that? She asked. I think we need to accept the situation as it is. The will cannot be changed. So you won't help me with the debts. It's your inheritance, your problems. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking that her whole life had collapsed. The man she considered closest had betrayed her. Her husband, for whom she had sacrificed her career, had turned his back on her. She was alone, with a huge debt and without any hope. Maybe it would have been better to die together with Dad, she thought desperately. Emma didn't know that her life would change again in the morning. She didn't know that Albert had prepared another surprise for her. She didn't know that his injustice was actually the highest expression of love and care. Emma sat on the floor in the room of her deceased father-in-law, surrounded by boxes and bags. Frank had left early for work and said goodbye. Clean up Dad's things. Whatever can be donated, donate it. He said it as if it were old junk, and not objects full of memories of a person. 2 weeks had passed since the will was opened. The banks had already sent notifications about the transfer of debts and demanded her presence to restructure the documents. Emma postponed this visit every day, hoping for a miracle that didn't come. She picked up Albert's old sweater, the gray one with the cable pattern that he liked to wear at home. The fabric still retained a faint scent of his cologne. Emma pressed the sweater to her face and broke down in tears. Why, Dad? She whispered through tears. Why did you do this to me? In these days, she had reviewed every conversation, every day of the last years in her memory. She looked for clues, signs that her father-in-law was dissatisfied with her, but she found nothing. On the contrary, he always thanked her, said she was better than his own daughter. Maybe he really thought I was caring for him out of self-interest. This thought hurt. Especially, Emma carefully folded the sweater and placed it in the box for charity. Then she began looking through the books. Albert loved to read, especially war memoirs and historical novels. The shelf was full of worn volumes, many with bookmarks on unfinished pages. War and Peace, with dried flowers between the pages. He read Tolstoy to his late wife when she was sick. Hot Snow, by Bondarev, his favorite book about the war. Live and Remember by Rasputin. He often quoted passages from this work. Every book was connected with a memory. Emma flipped through the pages, saw notes in the margins made by her father-in-law's hand. His neat teacher's handwriting. He always wrote very beautifully, even when his hand trembled after the stroke. On the lower shelf were photo albums. Emma took the first one. Wedding photos of Albert and his wife Matilda. Young, happy faces. Matilda in a white dress with a veil. Albert in an elegant suit. They're dancing, laughing, cutting the cake. She was very beautiful, Emma thought, looking at her mother-in-law whom she had never known in life. Then photos of little Frank. First as a baby, then in kindergarten, in school. Albert with his son fishing, both happy, with fishing rods in hand. Family trips to the garden shed, birthdays, Christmas trees. Emma found a photo with herself in it. Their first trip together to the garden shed after the wedding. She's standing next to the vegetable garden with a watering can in her hands and a shy smile on her face. Albert taught her to plant tomatoes. You have to feel the soil, Emma. If it's moist, don't water it. The roots will rot. Another photo, the day Frank was promoted to chief engineer. The whole family gathered at the table, raising glasses. Albert proud, happy. Frank in a new suit. Emma at his side, embracing her husband. Then more recent photos, already after the stroke. Albert in a wheelchair. Emma pushing him through the park. He's smiling. She is too. In another photo, they're playing chess. She had learned to play just for him. We were happy, Emma thought. Why did he do it then? The last album was thinner than the others. It contained very recent photos, taken with a phone and printed out. To her surprise, Emma discovered that most of them featured her. Cooking for her father-in-law, reading him a book, helping him sit in the chair. On the last page was a photo she didn't remember. Albert was sleeping in bed, and she was sitting next to him holding his hand. Someone had photographed them secretly, probably Frank. Under the photo was written in Albert's handwriting. My daughter, thank you for everything. Emma broke down in tears. If he considered her his daughter, why did he leave her the debts? It was cruel and incomprehensible. She closed the album and began looking through the dresser. In the first drawer were documents, passport, retiree ID, medical reports, everything related to his illness and treatment. Emma remembered every report, every diagnosis. In the second drawer, she found old letters, postcards, notebooks. Albert was a neat person. He kept everything he considered important. Letters from army comrades, birthday congratulations, postcards from distant relatives. Emma found an address book. Her own number was written in beautiful handwriting. Emma, daughter. Not daughter-in-law, but daughter. The third drawer was almost empty. Only handkerchiefs, reading glasses, and... Wait a minute. Emma noticed that the bottom of the drawer looked strange. She knocked on it with her knuckles. The sound was dull, not as it should be. She pulled the drawer out completely and examined it from below. Indeed, it had a false bottom. Along the edges, she noticed a thin gap. With her fingernail, she carefully lifted it. Her heart was pounding hard. Under the false bottom was a plastic folder tied with a ribbon. Her hands trembled as she untied the knot. Inside were documents. The first, a garage ownership deed. Emma looked. Owner, Emma Wagner. Her name, her passport details. This is impossible, she whispered. Second document. Another garage deed. Again her name. Third, the same. 3 garages, all in her name. When? How? She hadn't signed anything. She knew nothing about it, but that wasn't all. The next document. An ownership deed for a 5,000 square foot plot of land in a village. Again her name. Emma sat down on the floor. The documents fell from her hands. She felt dizzy. What does this mean? Where did the land and garages come from? She gathered the papers and carefully examined the dates. The garages were registered in her name 3 years ago. The land 2 years ago, exactly when the will was drafted. In the folder was another document, a bank certificate. Savings account in the name of Emma Wagner. Amount, $80,000. The account was opened 4 years ago. $80,000. Emma couldn't believe it. Under the documents lay a folded sheet. Emma opened it and recognized her father-in-law's handwriting. My dear Emma, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. You are probably angry with me because of the will. You think I was unjust, but hear me out until the end. My dear Emma, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. You are probably angry with me because of the will. You think I was unjust, but hear me out until the end. These garages I bought gradually, saving from my pension. The land in the village, I also bought it. I had all the documents secretly issued in your name through trusted people. You didn't know it, but legally, it all belongs to you. The money in the bank is also for you. I saved it bit by bit. I sold some old things. $80,000 will be enough for you to pay off the debts, and there will still be something left over. Now I'll explain why I did it this way. The debts in the will are not mine. They're Frank's. He asked me to take out loans in my name. He promised he would pay them back. He said he urgently needed the money for his business, but with his salary, he couldn't get a large loan. I trusted my son, took out the loans, he took the money, but never paid. He said he was having difficulties. Soon everything would get better, and then he stopped talking about it altogether. I understood that I would die soon, and decided to teach him a lesson. In the will, I wrote that the debts would pass to you. I wanted him to feel responsibility, to help his wife. But I also left you a way to solve the problem. You deserve all these assets. For 10 years, you cared for me as if you were my own daughter. You gave up your job, your life for a sick old man. Frank, on the other hand, almost never helped, was always busy with himself. This money and these assets are for your happiness. Sell what you need. Start your own business. You are smart and hardworking. Everything will turn out well for you. And don't be angry with me for the deception. Otherwise, Frank would have tried to take the inheritance away from you. This way, everything is fair. He gets the house and the shed that he knows about. You get what you deserve. Your dad, Albert. Emma finished reading the letter and broke down in tears, but now they were tears of relief and gratitude. Albert hadn't betrayed her. On the contrary, he had taken care of her better than a biological father. So it wasn't he who made the debts, but Frank. Her husband had deceived his sick father and then let her suffer, making her think her father-in-law had been unjust. How could you, Frank? She thought. How could you use your sick father? Emma checked the documents. 3 garages in different parts of the city, a plot of land, and $80,000 in a savings account. This was a fortune, worth much more than the apartment and shed that Frank had received. Albert had calculated everything, foreseen everything. He had even left her the opportunity to teach his ungrateful son a lesson. Outside, it was getting dark. Frank would be back from work soon. Emma carefully placed the documents in the folder. For now, she wouldn't tell anyone anything. First, she had to verify everything, make sure the documents were authentic. She put the folder in her bag and continued cleaning up as if nothing had happened. But internally, everything had changed. The feeling of hopelessness gave way to hope, the pain of betrayal to gratitude toward the wise old man. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered as she sorted through his things. "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the care. Thank you for teaching me to value justice." Emma didn't know that her life would change radically again the next day. She didn't know what battles awaited her and what discoveries she would make. She only thanked the man who was still protecting her even after his death. Emma woke up early with a single thought. She had to verify the documents. She hadn't been able to sleep all night, reading her father-in-law's letter over and over and examining the ownership deeds. Was it really true? Did she really have garages, land, and money? Frank had already left for work without having breakfast. In recent days, he barely spoke to her. He came late, left early. Emma suspected he was avoiding the conversation about the debts and hoping she would solve the problem alone. First, she called the bank where the account had been opened. She gave the account number from the certificate and her personal information. "Yes, this account exists," the employee confirmed. "The balance is $80,117, including interest. The account was opened in your name 4 years ago." Her heart beat faster. So the money really existed. And who opened the account? Emma asked. According to the documents, you yourself came to the bank with your passport, the employee replied. But I can't remember coming. Perhaps you forgot. It's been 4 years already. If you'd like, you can come to our branch to view copies of the documents. Emma quickly got dressed and went to the bank. At the branch, they showed her a copy of the passport and the account opening application. The signature resembled hers very closely, but was slightly different. This is not my signature, she said, but the passport is mine. The branch manager carefully compared the documents. The signature is very similar. Emma remembered that 4 years ago she had lost her passport. She noticed it was missing when she needed to go to the doctor with her father-in-law. The passport turned up 2 days later in the pocket of an old jacket of Albert's. At the time, she thought she had simply misplaced it. Now she understood. Her father-in-law had secretly taken the passport, opened the account, and forged the signature. Technically, it was illegal, but the money was meant for her. Emma went to the notary, Mr. Schreiber. He received her without an appointment. Perhaps he remembered her. What brings you here again? He asked. Property that is registered in my name. I want to know how it happened. The notary carefully examined the papers she gave him. Yes, I remember these transactions. Your father-in-law came several times, bought the garages with a notarized power of attorney in your name. He was a very careful man, checked everything multiple times. And I didn't sign the power of attorney. Mr. Schreiber opened a thick folder and took out a document. Here is a copy of the notarized power of attorney. It was signed in my presence. You came with Albert, presented your passport. Emma looked at the date, 4 years ago. At that time, her father-in-law could still walk with a cane. He left the house, but she definitely remembered they hadn't gone to the notary together. This is not my signature, she said, but the document was executed according to all the rules. I have a recording of the signing process. The notary turned on the computer. We record all important procedures on video. An image appeared on the screen. The notary's office. The same table, the same chairs. At the table sat Albert. Next to him, a woman dressed in dark clothing, her hair hidden under a scarf, wearing sunglasses on her face. That's not me, Emma said, but the passport presented was yours. Authentic. I checked it myself. The notary was puzzled. Emma watched the screen attentively. The woman really did resemble her. She had a similar build and body type, but her face wasn't visible because of the glasses and scarf. Albert had hired an actress or asked an acquaintance for a favor, she understood. He used my passport when I thought I had lost it. If this is true, the documents are invalid, the notary said. This is a case of fraud. But my father-in-law did it for me, for my benefit. I don't want to file charges. Normally, this is a legal violation. But if you, as the alleged victim, don't file a report, I won't file one. On the contrary, I confirm that I accept all the assets acquired this way. The notary shook his head. What a peculiar family. First, the father leaves debts to the daughter-in-law, and now it turns out he secretly bought real estate for her. The debts weren't his, Emma said, and told him the contents of the letter. Mr. Schreiber listened attentively. I understand. Albert was a very clever man. He came to me to get advice on how best to protect your interests. We discussed many options. He wanted you to receive a fair share of the inheritance, but in such a way that his son couldn't contest it. He couldn't officially bequeath these assets to you. Frank, as the only son, had a right to his statutory share. But this way, everything has been registered in your name for several years. And the debts. Albert wanted to teach his son a lesson, to show him that actions have consequences. But he left you the opportunity to resolve the situation. Emma thanked the notary and returned home. Her head was spinning from so much information. Albert wasn't just wise. He was a brilliant strategist. He had calculated everything several moves in advance. At home, she took out a calculator and added up the value of the inheritance. 3 garages in different parts of the city were each worth about $25,000. A plot of land 7 miles from the city, another $30,000, plus $80,000 in the savings account. Total, $155,000 minus the debts of $52,000. There remained $103,000. A whole fortune. Frank received an apartment worth $200,000, but with a mortgage of $120,000 and a garden shed that needed repairs and was worth barely $30,000. Actually, he had a little more than $110,000 in his hands. It was fair. Each got almost the same, but Frank didn't know it. In the evening, Emma waited for her husband. He came late, seemed tired. "What about the debts?" he asked without even greeting her. "I want to talk to you," she said. Next stop, the land registry office. Emma wanted to verify the ownership documents. In line, she was nervous, imagining they would tell her everything was fake, a cruel joke. But the official confirmed the authenticity of the documents. "The garages are registered in your name. All documents are in order. The transactions were handled by a notary. And who sold the garages? Various people. But payment was made in all cases in cash by a single person, Albert Wagner. He acted as your representative with a notarized power of attorney." "What power of attorney?" The official showed a copy of the document. The power of attorney was issued to Albert. It gave him the right to purchase real estate in her name. The signature resembled hers, but wasn't exactly the same. "When was the power of attorney issued?" Emma asked. 4 years ago, at the notary office of Mr. Schreiber. The same notary who had read the will, so Albert had planned everything in advance, prepared thoroughly. About what? About the loans that you asked Dad to take out in his name. Frank froze by the wardrobe, was silent for a few seconds, then turned to her. "How do you know that?" "Dad left a letter. He told the whole truth." "What letter?" "What nonsense." Emma took out the note and showed it to her husband. Frank read it quickly. His face darkened. "A crazy old man," he said, returning the letter to her. "He lost his memory at the end of his life." "That's not true." "Didn't you ask him to take out these loans?" "Well, yes, but I wanted to pay them back." 4 years without paying. "Why?" "The circumstances weren't favorable. Business wasn't going well. I had to freeze the investment." "What business? You didn't tell me anything about it." "Why burden you?" "Men's matters." Emma looked at him and didn't recognize him. Was this the person she had married, who had promised to love and protect her? "So you deceived a sick father and then left me alone with the consequences." "I didn't deceive anyone. Dad voluntarily agreed to help. Helping is when you pay back the debts, and you pretended for 4 years that nothing happened. Stop with the sermons. I'm already tired from work, and here at home too." Frank went to his office and slammed the door. Emma remained standing in the hallway. "So it's true? My husband used a sick father and then left me alone to clean up the mess." "All right," she said quietly. "Then we'll play by your rules." Emma didn't tell Frank anything about the documents she had found. She decided first to legalize everything, to make sure the assets really belonged to her, and then to decide what to do with her ungrateful husband. Albert was right. The lesson was necessary, not just for Frank, but for her too. A lesson that kindness can be exploited, that sacrifice isn't always appreciated, and that sometimes you have to defend yourself. "Thank you." "Dad," she whispered, looking at the stars outside the window. "Now I understand what you wanted to tell me." In the morning, Emma got up with a firm resolution. She would no longer remain silent or endure. Frank went to work without saying goodbye. He was probably still upset about yesterday's conversation. All the better, then she had time to arrange everything. First, she went to the bank where the deposit was, with her passport and Albert's death certificate. The procedure for withdrawing the money was simple. "You need to fill out an application for withdrawal of funds," the branch manager explained. "But note that on the amount exceeding $40,000, income tax is due." "How much exactly?" Emma asked. "On what exceeds $40,000, it would be approximately $10,000. Emma signed the documents. In 3 days, the money would be transferred to her card. $70,000 after taxes, more than enough to pay off the loan debts. The next step was to go to the bank where her father-in-law's main loan was. Emma wanted to know all the details of the debt. The loan manager, a corpulent middle-aged woman, received her in a small office full of file folders. Yes, a loan in the name of Albert Wagner. She leafed through a thick folder. $30,000. Loan term, 5 years. The borrower is deceased. The debt passes to the heirs according to the will. "And who actually received the money?" Emma asked. "The funds were handed personally to the borrower in cash. but we have a receipt stating that the money was transferred to a third party. The manager showed the document. The receipt stated that Albert Wagner transferred the $30,000 he received from the loan to his son, F. Wagner, for business purposes. Below was Frank's signature. And why was the loan taken out in the father's name and not the son's? Your husband didn't meet the income requirements. The salary wasn't enough for a $30,000 loan, but a retiree with real estate is, from the bank's point of view, a reliable borrower. Emma received a report on the amount of the debt. With late fees and penalties, the sum had risen to $34,000. At the second bank, the situation was similar. The credit card was issued in Albert's name, but Frank used it. The receipts proved it. Purchases in expensive stores, restaurants, car dealerships. Your father-in-law bought suits for $2,000, the consultant wondered, showing a receipt. Hardly. He hadn't left his bed in 3 years. But here's a receipt from the car dealership. The down payment for the car was $15,000, Emma remembered. 2 years ago, Frank had indeed changed cars. He said he had taken out an auto loan. It turned out that the money for the down payment came from the sick father's card. The total debt on the card was $21,000. In total, $55,000, even more than stated in the will. In the evening, Emma waited for Frank at home. He came in, threw down his briefcase, sat on the sofa, and turned on the TV. "We need to talk," she said. "About what again?" He didn't even turn his head. "About your debts." "What, my debts?" "Dad's debts that he left you." Emma took out her phone and showed photos of the bank documents. "This is your signature on the receipt. You personally received the money from the loan." Frank looked at the screen. His face changed. "So what?" "Dad offered to help himself. Helping is lending and getting back. And you didn't pay a cent in 4 years." "I didn't have money. But for a new car, suits, restaurants, I saw the receipts from Dad's card." Frank got up from the sofa and began pacing the room. "I was going to pay it all back. The business was supposed to take off." "What business, Frank?" "You work as an engineer at a factory." "I invested in a friend's startup. They promised big profits." "And where are these profits?" "It didn't work out." "That happens in business." Emma looked at her husband and knew he was lying. There was no startup, just expenses on the same car, clothes, entertainment, and the sick father and wife had to deal with the consequences. "All right," she said. "Then pay your debts yourself. You made them. You're responsible. How am I supposed to pay? I don't have this money." "Sell the apartment, the garden shed, what you inherited?" "Are you crazy? Where would we live then? And where am I supposed to get $52,000 for your debts?" Frank stopped, looked at her attentively. "Listen, what if we try to contest the will? We'll say Dad wasn't in his right mind. He was under your influence." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. He was suggesting she slander the person she had cared for 10 years. "Never," she said firmly. "Then solve your problems yourself. I have nothing to do with it." The next day, Emma went to a lawyer. Mrs. Vogel received her in a small office near the center. A stern woman around 50 with glasses and a business suit. "Tell me the situation in detail," the lawyer asked. Emma told everything, about caring for her father-in-law, the will, the documents found, her husband's behavior. Mrs. Vogel listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is an interesting case," she said at the end. "Formally, the debts were left to you, but there is evidence that the money was actually used by your husband. We can try to transfer the responsibility to him. How do we do that? We file a lawsuit to recognize the husband as the actual borrower. We have receipts, checks, witness statements from bank employees. In addition, your assets can serve as security. And if the husband resists, court proceedings will be inevitable. But we have good chances. The evidence is strong." Emma signed a contract with the lawyer. A week later, the lawsuit was filed in court. Frank found out when he received the summons. That night, he stormed home furiously. "You sued me!" he shouted. "Yes, I want you to be responsible for your debts. How dare you? I'm your husband." A husband who deceived his sick father and left his wife alone with the consequences. "It's because your lawyer convinced you. She wants to separate us." "No one convinced me. I made the decision." Frank paced back and forth, muttering something about ingratitude and betrayal. Then he suddenly stopped. "And what if I also file a lawsuit, contest the will, Say that Dad wasn't in his right mind and you manipulated him. Do it, Emma replied calmly. But consider that I have expert opinions proving Dad was in his right mind, and witnesses who saw how I cared for him. What witnesses? Neighbors, doctors, nurses. Everyone saw how I devoted 10 years of my life to caring for a sick person. And where were you? Frank understood that his bluff didn't work. Indeed, everyone knew that Emma devotedly cared for her father-in-law, while he only occasionally showed up at home. A month later, the first court hearing took place. Frank came with his lawyer, a young man in a cheap suit. Obviously, he didn't have money for a good lawyer. The judge, Mrs. Huber, reviewed the files and heard the parties. The plaintiff requests that the defendant be recognized as the actual borrower of loans taken out in his father's name, she summarized. The defendant objects and claims he received the money as a gift. Frank's lawyer tried to prove that Albert had voluntarily helped his son, and that the receipts were just formalities. The father wanted to help his son. Start a business, he said. No one forced him to take out loans, but Mrs. Vogel presented convincing evidence. The borrower, Mr. Wagner, was in a serious condition. He couldn't use the money himself. All purchases with the credit card were made by the defendant. The payments were also made from his account up to a certain point. The court requested bank statements and medical records about Albert's condition. Everything confirmed Emma's version. At the second hearing, witnesses testified. The neighbor, Aunt Lily, told how Emma cared for him. She carried him in her arms like a child, the old lady said, and the son came rarely, was mostly traveling on business. The neurologist confirmed that Albert couldn't walk on his own after the stroke and needed constant care. The patient was conscious, but physically very limited, the doctor explained. A bank employee told how the loan was processed with the participation of the borrower's son. The young man knew the conditions well, personally signed the documents for withdrawal of money, he explained. At the third hearing, Frank's lawyer tried a new tactic. My client hasn't worked for 10 years, lived at the family's expense, he stated. She should be grateful for the support and not make demands. It was a low blow. Mrs. Vogel was outraged. The plaintiff was not a dependent. She was caring for a sick family member, which is a socially beneficial activity. Professional caregivers charge at least $3,000 per month for this work. But officially she didn't work, the opponent insisted. But she saved the family. The cost of a professional caregiver. In 10 years, that would have been more than $300,000. The judge listened to all the arguments attentively. At the fourth hearing, she announced the verdict. The court recognizes that the actual beneficiary of the loans was the defendant, Mr. F. Wagner. He is ordered to reimburse the plaintiff for the cost of paying the debts in the amount of $55,000. The judgment is immediately enforceable. Emma had won. Frank had to pay her the entire amount of the debt. After the hearing, he approached her in the courthouse hallway. Satisfied? He asked. Very satisfied with justice, she replied. I don't have this money. I'll go bankrupt. That's your choice. You could have honestly admitted the debt and reached an amicable settlement. And if I appeal? Appeal. But remember that every day without payment increases the amount of late fees. Frank understood that he had definitively lost. Now he would have to sell his father's inheritance to pay off the debts he himself had caused. It's enough that you destroyed our family, he said finally. You destroyed the family when you decided to live at the expense of a sick father, Emma replied. She walked down the street and felt a strange relief. Finally, justice had prevailed. Albert would have been satisfied. The lesson served both the son and herself. A month after the verdict, Emma received payment from Frank. He sold his father's garden house and took out a second mortgage on the apartment. There was no other way out. The $55,000 came in a single transfer to her account. Here's your money, he said, showing the receipt. Now we're even. Even, Emma agreed. Frank packed his things and moved in with a friend. The divorce was quick and amicable. There was nothing to divide. The apartment remained his with the debts. He didn't even know what property she had. Emma remained alone in the empty apartment. The first days were strange. Silence, no one to feed, no one to care for. For 10 years, her life had been scheduled down to the minute. Now the time belonged only to her. She visited the plot of land in the village of Pinewood Valley. 5,000 square feet in a quiet location near a river, surrounded by pine forest. A beautiful but empty place, just an old shed and a clearing overgrown with grass. You could build something here, she thought. She decided to sell one of the garages. She needed money for a new project. She quickly found a buyer, $27,000 for a garage in a good location. With this money, she went to an architect. A man around 40 with gray temples listened attentively to her idea. "I want to open an outdoor cafe," Emma explained. "Small, cozy, for families with children, for those who are tired of city noise." "Interesting idea," the architect said. "On the plot, you can build a summer terrace, pavilions, a children's playground." He sketched out a plan, but warned that she would need permits to connect to utilities. "How much will it cost?" "About $50,000 in the first phase. Simple construction, no luxury." Emma had exactly that money from the bank deposit and decided to take the risk. Construction began in spring. Emma supervised every phase: foundation, walls, roof. The workers were surprised that a woman knew so much about building. "My father-in-law taught me," she explained. "He built and repaired his whole life." By summer, the main building was finished. A small house with a kitchen and a room for 20 people, an open terrace, a children's playground with swings and a slide. Emma named the cafe Albert's Place in memory of her father-in-law. The sign read in beautiful letters, "Family Cafe in the Green." The menu was simple: home cooking, everything she could cook herself. The first visitors were neighbors from the surrounding villages. An elderly couple, Simon and Viola, came in out of curiosity. "Well, it turned out well," the grandfather said, tasting the soup. "Like my late mother's." "And the prices are reasonable," the grandmother added. "In the city, they charge double for such a portion." Gradually, the cafe became known in the city. On weekends, families came, young couples, groups of friends for barbecues. Emma worked from morning to evening, cooked, served, cleaned, maybe hire a waiter, one of the regular customers suggested. "For now, I can manage alone," she replied. "I don't want additional expenses." After 6 months, the cafe began generating stable income, between $3,000 and $4,000 per month. Not millions, but enough for a normal life. Emma rented a small apartment in the city and bought a used car. Life stabilized, confidence in the future returned. In autumn, a middle-aged man came to the cafe, tall, with kind eyes, in a simple shirt and jeans. "Can I order soup and tea?" he asked. "Of course, have a seat. I'll bring it to you right away," Emma replied. "Levin," he introduced himself. It turned out he was a veterinarian. He worked in a nearby neighborhood. He had come from an emergency call and decided to eat something. "You cook very well," he praised her. "Like at Grandma's house. Thank you. You can tell you put effort into it." "How long has the cafe been open?" 6 months. I built and cooked everything myself. That's amazing. Not all women dare to do something like that. Levin began coming regularly, always polite, calm, with a good sense of humor. Emma began looking forward to his visits. "Do you have a family?" she asked him one day. "I was married. We divorced 3 years ago. I have no children," he answered simply. "I also recently divorced. It turned out I lived for 10 years with a man who wasn't mine. Sometimes people change, or we don't know them well from the beginning." The conversations became more intimate. Levin talked about his work and the animals he healed. Emma spoke about building the cafe and her future plans. "I want to expand," she shared. "Maybe build guest cabins. People come on weekends and have no accommodation." "Good idea. Ecotourism is very fashionable now." In November, Levin helped repair the cafe's roof after a storm. He worked together with the construction workers without sparing himself. "Thank you very much," Emma said in the evening. "You're welcome. Friends should help each other. We're friends, right?" She looked into his eyes and understood. Yes, they were friends, but maybe more than just friends. In winter, the cafe only worked on weekends. In the cold season, there were few customers. Emma used the free time to plan the business's development. I sold the second garage for $28,000. I invested the money in purchasing equipment for the summer kitchen and building materials. By spring, I'll build another pavilion and a slide for children, she planned. Levin often helped with advice and sometimes with work. He never imposed himself or demanded gratitude. He was simply there when needed. "You have golden hands," Emma said, watching him repair the broken swings. "We all have golden hands when we want to help," he replied. By the end of winter, Emma understood that she had fallen in love. Not with passion, as in her youth with Frank, but with warmth and security. Levin became part of her life and her future plans. "Would you like to go into business?" she asked him in March. "In what sense?" "Be my partner in the cafe and in life." Levin was silent for a moment, then smiled. "Are you serious?" "Very serious?" "Then yes, I do." In spring, they prepared together for the new season. Levin helped build an additional pavilion and landscape the grounds. It turned out he had good organizational skills and contacts with food suppliers. "My friend has a farm," he told her. "He can deliver meat and vegetables to us directly without the store markups." "Perfect. The quality will be better and the prices lower." Emma felt that her life had changed radically. From a submissive housewife who lived for the interests of others, she had become an independent businesswoman. She had her own income, her own plans, and a reliable partner by her side. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, looking at Albert's photo hanging in the cafe. "You taught me to be strong." The old man looked from the portrait with kind eyes. He seemed to approve of her choice. After a year, the cafe became a local attraction. On weekends, whole families came from the city, and on weekdays, regular customers from the surrounding villages. Emma built 3 guest cabins that she rented to tourists. Income reached $10,000 a month. Levin became her official partner. They divided responsibilities. He handled administrative matters. She cooked and received guests. "I'm thinking about a franchise," Emma said, counting the profits. "We could open 2 more cafes in other neighborhoods." "Don't rush things," Levin advised. "Let's perfect this business first." They lived in one of the cabins on the cafe grounds. A simple, quiet life in the middle of nature. Levin continued working as a veterinarian, but now he treated customers directly at the cafe. Many summer guests came with their pets. In June, an unexpected visitor appeared. Frank parked his old car at the entrance and uncertainly entered the cafe. "Hello," he said. "Hello," Emma replied, continuing to prepare the salad. Frank sat at a secluded table, ordered tea and a piece of cake. He ate in silence and looked around. "You did well," he finally said. "Thank you. I sold the apartment, moved to a studio on the outskirts, paid my debts. But there's no money left." Emma didn't respond. She wasn't angry. She just didn't know what to say. "Emma, forgive me." His voice trembled. "I was a fool. I didn't appreciate what I had." "It doesn't matter anymore," she replied calmly. "It matters to me," he confessed. "I understood that I lost the closest person and shamed my father with my behavior." Emma looked at her ex-husband. He had aged, grown thin. Fatigue and regret could be seen in his face. "Dad loved you," she said quietly. "You should have acted responsibly, I know." "I understood it too late," Frank muttered. He finished his tea, paid, and left. He didn't come back again. Levin asked nothing, just put his arm around her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he said simply. In autumn, they got married. A small wedding at the cafe, only the closest friends and neighbors. Emma wore a simple white dress. "Levin, a light suit, long live the bride and groom," the guests shouted, raising their glasses. "To Albert," Levin toasted. "To the wise man who taught us to value justice." "To Dad," Emma added. In the evening, they sat on the terrace and looked at the stars. "Don't you regret the past?" Levin asked. "No, everything was worth it. Dad showed me what a real family should be." "How?" "Where people help each other, where there's honesty and respect." Levin kissed her on the forehead. "Then we'll do it together." On New Year's, Emma received a letter from Frank. He wrote that he had found work in another city and was starting a new life. "Thank you for the lesson," it said at the end. "Dad was right, and so were you. Be happy." Emma showed Levin the letter. "Will you respond?" he asked. "No," she said. "It's better to leave the past in the past." In spring, they learned that they were expecting a baby. Emma was 45 years old, but the doctor said everything was fine. "It will be a boy," she said, stroking her belly. "We'll name him Albert in honor of his grandfather, the most just man I've ever known." The son was born in September, a healthy, strong boy with serious eyes like his great-grandfather. Emma held the baby in her arms and thought about the long journey she had traveled. From a submissive housewife to a successful businesswoman, from an unhappy marriage to true love. "Grandpa Albert took care of everything," she whispered to her son. "He left us not just money, but also a lesson. Never forget, justice always prevails." Levin built another playground next to the cafe. "For our son and for other children," he said. The business flourished, the family grew. Life was full of meaning. Sometimes Emma remembered her father-in-law's words. Justice is when everyone gets what they deserve. She had received hers: love, respect, independence, happiness, and most importantly, the realization that good always returns. Sometimes it just takes time and wisdom to see it. If you liked this story and would like to support the continuation of our work on Clara's Stories channel, we would be very grateful for a small donation. Every contribution helps us create more stories for you. You can find the link in the description. Thank you very much for your support.